Really, it's good to see you all, and thank you for coming. So this will be the second part of the two-part mini-series of Ecodharma talks of this summer concerning bears and human-bear binary in particular. This talk is really coming from my pounding mammal heart to yours. And I thought, let's start today by really just for a minute, like internally check in with ourselves. How are we today, right at this moment? Because I can report before we start that I just feel like my heart is really tender today, and I'm especially feeling the fundamental uncertainties of the world today, globally, but also in my personal life, really palpably. So I'm just gonna welcome it all as being part of this talk and presence, and thank you for all of you holding this space, and you're also very welcome with however you feel today, this morning. So, like I said, I'm going to be continuing talking about bears and humans. I'm going to be drawing from my practice, collaborative practice with visual artist Penny McCarthy in Sheffield, some thinkers of Buddhist eco-philosophy, as well as critical animal studies and animal rights viewpoint as well. So just to recap briefly what happened last time, what we spoke of, what I spoke of. This was a month ago and it was recorded. So if you want to look back that talk, that's available. But briefly, I was speculated with the definition of the middle way. And I was primarily drawing inspiration from Timothy Morton and how they define the middle way actually not as something harmonious or just right, but actually something that has a quality of hesitancy, feeling unreal, feeling even weird. And so for me, these are qualities as an artist that I typically actually work with, and these are, I consider, fuel for my practice. So and furthermore, I actually purposefully stimulate making familiar things strange, for example. So this is all in the aim of snapping out of our typical habitual thinking patterns, our consumerist attitudes, and so forth. But to kind of sum here, so the middle way can be seen as a creative making method, but also it includes all the feelings and sensations that you might possibly have. So it's kind of inclusive, appreciative, more than we typically would think. Then I'm going to actually go into challenging the human animal and human bear binary, or continue doing that. So today I decided to do that specifically by focusing on postures. So postures, thinking what they actually suggest and cause in terms of power dynamics and species hierarchy. And if you think of postures in this way, they are actually important contributors to the kind of human, more than human relationship problem that is considered widely actually backgrounding the whole climate crisis. So postures in different contexts have different meanings. As a performance artist, postures, physical postures, gestures are really central media for communication and making connection with the audience, with the materials, with your fellow performers. But here today, I'm not just focusing on something that is aesthetically pleasing or effective or less injury prone or something like that, but really this kind of power relation, power dynamic quality that postures actually suggest. Of course, postures, and this is what I'm going to talk next about, is we can think of them as important core factors of our species evolution, actually, and a concept of what it means to be a human. Buddhism, Dharma practice, obviously, postures are very important, and we practice in multiple different kinds of postures, including prostrations and movement practices like dance, yoga, qigong. All of these actually draw also from more than human, multi-species postures. But maybe most centrally today, so as a performance artist, with my practice with Penny, we're working currently with taxidermy. So I'm going to introduce taxidermy as a practice of presenting specific postures chosen by human, where we're exhibiting deceased non-human animals. So here I would say that it's important to note, though, that postures, it's not just about obviously how it looks on the outside and how we perceive it, but really if we're experiencing postures, and I think that's all we can really experience, our own postures really, it does change something in our attentional internal posture as well. So we're not just interested in the outer performance. The field of soma aesthetics is one example where this inner sensing of a particular posture has really been researched quite a bit. So, but here, to summarize a bit, I'm considering postures as conveyors of different kinds of meanings, power relations, but also as a vehicle to change our internal attentional posture. So zooming in further today, I'm looking at my notes because I want to stay on track. This is such a delicious topic that it would be easy to branch out from me. So today I'm specifically focusing on upright posture. So human uprightness is really one of the key features that distinguishes us from even our closest mammal relatives. So if we think of other animals, David Abram writes how other animals, as opposed to us, really think with their whole bodies, kind of in a decentralized manner. Whereas humans, we are in contact with the earth with a very small surface area of our bodies, just our foot soles normally. And again, Tim Ingold has written a lot about this in terms of walking and walking practices. Most often, actually, in urban environments, of course, we also cover our feet. We also cover the earth. So there's kind of a double insulation between our bodies and earth. So the direct contact is not really taking place. And actually this, in that sense, we're kind of floating. So there is consequences that this posture has led us experience or led us in a certain relationship with the earth. This was grammatically a complicated sentence, but what I mean that our urban lifestyle, if we live in high rises, we move mostly through vehicles, which are also kind of floating in the air. It does cause a certain attitude towards the planet Earth. So even though human uprightness really has a lot of merits and actually has enabled us develop ourselves cognitively, it's spiritually very important to be aligned vertically. However, in this talk, I also want to point out 3 of the challenges it kind of presents when you try to think ecologically and for the more than human world. So firstly, the already mentioned being detached from the land. So when we have no sensory connection of the earth, the materiality of it, actually it's much harder to kind of develop appreciation for it. And it's actually quite tempting to ignore it and think of it as dead, really. And especially if it's covered by concrete or pavement and other materials that we've developed. So this floating and detachment of the land is really, as a cause of upright posture, can be seen as problematic. The second challenge is that when we're standing upright, most smaller beings, we're looking down upon them. So birds aside, but our pets, insects on the ground, there is a downward facing gaze. And this also does do something to the power dynamics of the situation. We're able to pick up the smaller species, which are walking on their forelegs. So that automatically gives us a sense of mastery and control. Now, the third point is really as a consequence of that. So uprightness has freed our hands to develop tools and methods of oppression, basically. So even the larger species were now able to kind of utilize instruments to control, put them in a circumstance we want them to be, and so forth. So this hands-free quality has actually kind of led to obviously dangerous and oppressive power dynamics between species. So to just sum this point that I want to make, that human uprightness doesn't necessarily result in moral uprightness of any kind. So actually quite the opposite. So this is actually what I started to work with myself last year or earlier, but last year I showed you the work I've done with the reindeer. Some of you might remember that. And there I'm purposefully lowering myself to the ground to picnic amongst the herd of reindeer around me, really to kind of shift and blur the typical power dynamics, though I must add that reindeer antlers and so they are not completely disabled in terms of defending themselves, but nevertheless lowering my body on the ground did something, and looking up, them towering over me. So how does this relate to bears actually? So bear is an interesting mammal because actually bears can stand upright as well. They are close to human size, and bear's skeletal structure is very similar to human. So they have a bilateral symmetry. They have a round head with frontal eyes. Bears can also sit. They can sit like a human child would sit when they're still flexible. And also bears are they can operate hands-free, front paws-free. So they actually exhibit tool-using behavior. So this is so wonderful, except that bears are also have become victims of this, their own success and qualities, because humans have recognized for centuries already these qualities as something curious, something that can be utilized for human entertainment purposes, and this has resulted in severe forms of bear abuse, both in the name of education and entertainment, as well as decoration, interior decoration. So now I'm moving on to the postures in and of taxidermy practices. So taxidermy, fascinating, but also uncomfortable practice, reminding of us of our colonial past scientific practices. So the literal translation of taxidermy is arrangement of skins. So taxidermy was developed in the 18th century as a preservation method to kind of stuff and mount and display and exhibit either parts of an animal or the whole animal in a kind of lifelike state. So why is this an issue on any level these days? So from an animal rights viewpoint, taxidermy practices really are making the non-human animals as trophies to be collected from their natural habitat. And unfortunately, these such colonial attitudes are still present today. Secondly, and related to the first one, in the process, animals are really made into objects inevitably. So, and both of these, being a trophy and object, is actually, we as humans are making the non-humans as our property, basically. So they are exhibited for our own study, for our gaze, to please our gaze, our curiosity. What we don't typically consider is that what might the non-human animals think of these practices themselves? And I'm just really wanted to bring forward a study that shows that crows, for example, they have grieving rituals for their deceased family members, and they absolutely don't like when humans are picking up the dead bird from the ground. They really ferociously defend their family member's body remains. So we can't just, and we shouldn't just assume that once someone's dead, once a being is dead, we can do whatever we want with their bodies. So now I'm gonna show you something weird. Since I talk about weird, I'm now going to I can't do this at the same time when I'm talking. Basically, what I'm trying to show you, and it's coming, is an improvisation with taxidermy in a museum of natural science. I'm gonna go back there, and now, so now you should be able to see this. So here you are. I mean, here I am, but so looking at my notes, so this is very raw footage. So you are the first audience seeing this. Why I wanted to show you this is that mine and Penny's project is really asking how to reframe taxidermy differently, and what specifically performance art can do to reconsider taxidermy and the colonial gaze within. Also, reversely, we're asking what kind of performances are embedded in the practice of taxidermy as a process. So here I'm situated in a space with a diverse selection of taxidermy artifacts, representations of animals that might actually never see each other in their natural habitat. So it's a very interesting display and composition of beings. So I'm here working with the bear costume, which is another curious manifestation of human behavior. We actually manufacture costumes so that we can simulate other beings. Actually, some non-human animals do this as well, mostly for survival purposes. So here I'm connecting to the closest relative in this room, the polar bear, in an upright position, and start exploring the postures that they have been installed in. Then moving on to postures that bears actually display and use and just live in their life. It's just that quite quickly the limitations of the costume, it's made of cloth, obviously, it's not flexible like skin, so actually it can't facilitate. It was breaking apart before I even got into a bear pose, so that in itself is, and really the costume is actually altering purposefully my sensory perception. It's pulling, and so it's too large from elsewhere, too short from other parts. I can't see anything. I can barely hear anything. It's very hot. It causes me to move in a particular cautious manner because I'm afraid to bump into the displays. So here the kind of costume is gaining its own agency, if you like. So actually, I started to think of the costume as a skin. So if you think of the preparation of the taxidermy, deconstructing the body, peeling the skin off, emptying it, stuffing it, selecting a pose, mounting it, the costume is actually, even though it's also a very problematic artifact in itself, is actually allowing certain kind of exploration of these aspects. And the costume itself takes postures as a pile on the floor. It can be folded in different ways or spread on the floor as what they call a bear rug. So here, what kinds of postures does the costume make me to create? So I'm both arranging the skins here, but also the skin is arranging me. If you see the struggle with the costume, it's too hot, it was peeling, it was glued to my skin basically. So I'm having my skin-to-skin contact with the bear here, getting stuck with it. So the costume kind of starts living its own life and move me around and create these weird postures in the process. So how does this then relate to actual bears? Well, this project is dedicated to Bruin the bear of the Sheffield Botanical Gardens bear pit in the 1830s. And all the bears that are still used in entertainment industry abused, even in Europe. So bear pits still exist. This is not just some Victorian remain. So what I recently did is that I adopted a bear, Bolik the bear, and I'm now going to introduce you to him. So Bolik lived the first 15 years of his life chained in a small concrete cage in a Ukrainian hotel. Recently, Bolik was rescued to a bear sanctuary, Liberty, in Romania. And since then, he's able to feel the earth under his paws. He's able to interact with other bears, sleep under the stars. All of this was completely overwhelming to him in the beginning. So what we're witnessing here are really kind of postures of freedom and liberty, and in between postures of swimming and rolling over the hills. So I want to close today by thinking, what does this adoption cause for my attentional posture? So knowing that this will bring me a lot of joy, and it does, but it's also going to be one-sided love. That Bolik will never know that I've adopted him. We will likely never meet each other. So how do I just enjoy this love that I have for him from a distance without turning him into a property? So sometimes care means not interfering, I would think in this case, but all the profit we potentially make with Penny, with our project, will be donated to Liberty Bear Sanctuary as well. So thereby trying to create a full circle from the horrors of the bear pit to actually supporting bear-worthy life for the current day bear. So with this, I'm gonna thank you all and turn it to Lama Namgyal for commentary if he likes. Thank you.
I don't know which words to say first, weird, strange, or speechless. Um, Quite a wonderful presentation. And, uh, really taking me into areas of sensitivity and consideration that are not part of my normal ken, including how shoes insulate me from the environment, um, how so many aspects of our environment, our constructed environment, insulate us from our actual environment, the more natural environment. And um, clearly, there's a lot more to be said about taxidermy and the nature of it, the importance of it, and how it affects how we relate to animals. Um, it's very, very stimulating and very much coming at me from so many angles that I'm not usually come at. So I appreciate what you've brought up. I think at core, it is reminding us of our relatedness. And before you came on, I was thinking, well, if she doesn't come, what can I do to talk about if she doesn't show up? And I was thinking about independence and relatedness as sort of two opposites, and how certain political, philosophical individuals in our current culture really thrive on pushing the idea of independence. And it's such a, to me, erroneous perspective, uh, that we are so interrelated and so dependent on one another in so many ways that are known and unknown. Uh, and you're just bringing out kind of one set of relationships when you're exploring the human bear interface. And I think it's a wonderful perspective to look at how we as humans uh, have taken a certain positionality. Using the word posture, I think, is very fertile. A certain positionality with respect to animals and what the implications are for the animals themselves. And I so appreciated you bringing in raven morning behavior, because we've actually, even with I'll start crying in a second, with our birds, noticed that when one bird died, the other bird had a very specific ritual of walking around the bird that had died. It was very, very intentional, and somehow the bird knew how to do that, but it very much touched us. So there's a lot about animals that I suspect we don't know and or appreciate, but just waking us up to all of this. Bravo.
Mm.
And I loved seeing you in the costume and hearing everything you had to say about inhabiting a bear skin. Very, very, again, profound and visually rich. So, very, very stimulating presentation. And I'm certainly never going to look at a bear the same way again. Uh, so thank you so much, Kaisu, and keep up the great work and keep looking into all of this stuff. You're bringing so much
Mm.
to our attention in fresh ways.
Thank you, Arvila.
Yeah. So it is 11 a.m. Central Time. Our broadcast center is in Houston. Paul, do you want to lead the beginning prayers from wherever? And maybe the beginning.